So I went for the walk this morning and I decided to take a longer way, which caused me to walk by Sprouts. It was 8:15 at this point, and I was like, if Sprouts is open, I'm going to get apple turnovers. Sprouts is open. Good morning, lovelies. Welcome to another rendition of Middle School Ministry Sunday Sermon with a British accent. Welcome. The accent is free of charge this week only. Anyways, so today we have quite a few announcements to kind of prep you for 2021 because it's 2021. Boom, bam. Wow, craziness. But before we get to that, I do want to talk about the fact that it's a new year. New year, same me. Anyway, on to announcements it's just going to be me this week. And it's just, we gave the leaders time off, and then I forgot, or a thing, you know? So, here's me. Thanks, me. So, we do have quite a few announcements. We have this week, this Wednesday, we are re-upping our Wednesday evenings. We will be launching with another game night. This one's going to be unique and special. This isn't like the game night we had for Christmas where we had breakout rooms. This is actually going to be a very focused game night. So keep on our social media, whether your parents are on Facebook, whether you follow us on Instagram, whether it's the website, which totally works. Please hop on there and join us. This is for everybody. Everyone is totally welcome. And then next week, next Wednesday, we will be back in our life groups. Same format as Wednesday. So every Wednesday we will be having something from 7 to 8:30, whether that's actual Bible study or we're having a game night. All of that information can be found on the website as it updates week to week. But if you have any questions, let's say you're not a part of a life group, that's totally cool. Email Josh or myself. We would love to get you connected into a life group. We have some amazing leaders who want to spend time with you, and also you students are just amazing. So hang out with other students that are also amazing. So let us know if you want to join a life group. If you aren't already a part of a life group, like I said, just let us know, show up, whatever the case may be. We want you to be there. Just let us help you get in there. So this semester, from January to May, we are going to be having just basically our life groups are going to be focused on what it means to have a fresh start, what it means to embrace seasons. So with that, each month we are going to be diving into a specific topic. So this month we are going to be focusing on new beginnings and New Year's resolutions, and what do we do with that? How do we stick to plans we've made, and how do we accept the plans that God put forth in Jesus that we are now being called to fulfill? So pay attention to our website, like I said, Instagram, Facebook, all of that jazz. But we will see you this Wednesday at 7 p.m. on Zoom. The links and everything can be found at www.lakeav.org/middle school. You guys are awesome. We'll see you later. Oh, and join us for Zoom after this. Don't go anywhere. As soon as I say toodles, hop over to Zoom. It's super fun. We'll probably, actually, you know what? I'm going to make an executive decision right now. We're going to talk about this, yes, but we're going to do an Among Us tournament. It's going to be great. We're going to kind of watch it kind of dwindle down. It's going to be super funny. We also played hide and seek last week. I actually really like hide and seek. We're going to have a hide and seek tournament. It's going to be great. Okay, be there or be squared. There might be prizes. I don't know. I'm going to decide when we get there. So last week we started a really quick, just 2-week series called When One Door Closes. And the reason we wanted to do this the week before New Year's and the week after New Year's is because this can be a time of year where we kind of start thinking about who do I want to be? How do I want to better myself or better my community around me? One of the big things that we, as not only a community within Lake Avenue Middle School, but as human beings, we need to be able to learn how to empathize and sympathize. So those are two different things. So to empathize with someone is to have felt that emotion before and be able to sit with that person in that emotion, right? So it's saying I am so sorry that you've been bullied or teased. and being able to sit with that person because you too have also been bullied or teased. It's not to monopolize the conversation and take it over, but it's to be able to sit with someone and say, you and your feelings are valid. Like, what you've experienced is not okay, but I am here for you and I know what it's like. And this is an example of what happens like after time and healing. Then we have sympathy. And sympathy is a little bit more common than empathy. Sympathy is when your emotions are tethered to a specific example, and you therefore you don't feel what that other person feels because you haven't had that circumstance in life before, but you care about this person and you're gonna walk with them regardless. So it's really a change of language and posture. So for example, I have never experienced racism. I've never been discriminated against. And so for me, in my experience as a white woman, I cannot sit and say with my friends of color, oh, racism. I know what you mean. Because I don't know what that means. So instead, I sit with them and I listen and I learn, and instead I walk out with an execution plan of like, what am I as someone who has privilege? What do I do with my privilege? What do I do after this conversation instead of just going, tough? That's not good enough. How do I, as a sympathetic person, step out and turn this sympathy into action? So that's sympathy and empathy. Sound good? These are really, really hard emotions for Christians, because sometimes when we are asked to act, it doesn't actually mean we're being asked to do something, be asked to fix a problem. Sometimes the action is to sit with people. Sometimes our action is to sit and mourn with someone. Sometimes our action is to dance and be joyful and be excited in moments of celebration with someone. But we have to balance the joyful dancing with the tears of loss. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're back in Ecclesiastes. We kind of did a little reverse. So we read the second part of Ecclesiastes 3. But today we are going to read kind of the first part. So we're going to be reading verses 1 through 8. Here we go. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time to war and a time for peace. Let's pray. Gracious and holy God, living in this balance of joy and pain, loss and gain, God, I pray that your presence is so vivid in each of these moments. But God, most of all, I pray that in those gray areas where we're not mourning and we're not joyful, God, I pray in those gray areas that you are also proclaimed to be the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and the Creator of the universe. God, I pray that as we learn about what this gray area holds or how to sit in this black and white moment, God, I pray that you shine through us. Give us tangible ways to show your love to others. God, may we always be pointing back to you. Speak through me, and may my words be a form of worship to you. Amen. Yes, I know I said universe. So I like to tell you how I've learned these passages. The reason I know this passage is actually kind of funny. So I grew up very much like entrenched in 70s and 80s culture because that is where my parents grew up. So that's what they passed on to me. So I grew up, like I said, like 70s, 80s hair bands were my mom's jam. Like 70s, 80s ballad bands were my dad's jam. My mom was super into pop culture. She was super trendy, super cool, go Mama B. My dad was very nerdy, playing Dungeons and Dragons literally in his friend's basement. Like very different people, very different experience of the 70s and the 80s. But the reason I remember this passage specifically is because when I was about probably 8 or 9, my mom and I sat down, we watched one of my mom's favorite movies, Footloose. And in that, Kevin Bacon, beautiful man, Kevin Bacon is in a very traditional Christian town where they're not allowed to dance. That's like the big thing, right? And the reason being is they can't have prom. So all of his friends, he's a senior at this high school, all of his friends can't have a senior prom. And he's coming from like a big city. And so he's like, what, you guys don't dance? So he has to appeal to the, I just spit, wow. Oh yeah. He has to appeal to the city council to have them like get rid of this law of no dancing. And so he's like trying to find ways to do this. And so he uses a bunch of Bible verses because he's in love with the town's pastor's daughter. Her name is Ariel. She had red hair. Irony? I think not. So anyway, so he falls in love with Ariel. So Ariel helps him figure out how to like use the Bible to talk to the city council, who is like, it's in the Bible not to dance. And he's like, but it is. So he talks about here, there's a time for joy, a time for pain, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. And so it's like, wow. So anyway, so that's my history with whatever. You guys don't even care. If you care, type I care. Thanks, Leah. I appreciate that. So anyway, I'm really excited for what 2020 has to offer us because 2020 has a lot to offer. We entered 2020. Wow. I just realized I said 2021. Wow. So got it. Thanks, Leah. So I'm really excited for 2021. It's a year of possibility because we just exited a year of unexpected events, if that makes sense. Yes, same thing, whatever. When we entered 2020, we, as a society really, we had huge, grand expectations. Like all of the holidays landed on a Friday or a Saturday. It was like, just the satisfaction of like 2020, like when you wrote it out, it's like, oh, so satisfying. And just, you know, just entering a new decade and just being out of the early 2000s, the 2010s, now we're in the 2020s. And then we had a global pandemic. Like, oof, what a damper. It's one of those things where you just kind of go like, well, I knew that I asked for new experiences in 2020. This is not one of them. Because here's the thing, whether we like it or not, we all experienced some form of loss and some form of gain. And sometimes that's not good things. Sometimes when it comes to loss, sometimes it's good things. Like, I have a friend who decided to start eating healthy when we were supposed to be on quarantine. And so she was staying really safe. She's like, I'm just gonna be in my apartment, got like groceries for 2 weeks, I feel good. And so she ended up starting to eat healthy and she lost a bunch of weight. And so now she has a healthy lifestyle that she's almost been doing for a year. So loss like that is good, where she's made a decision that she wants to treat her body better through eating and through exercise. She goes for walks all the time. But then you have the experience of people who have gained things, like people who have gained more responsibility, whether that is because of a financial burden on their family from the pandemic, whether it's from school and now being at home, having to double time their school experience as well as helping their family, or whatever it means to be at home, because some people being home isn't safe. So like I said, loss and gain don't always mean what we think loss and gain should mean. So I want us, as a middle school ministry, as one door closes of 2020 and everything that has shifted in our lives because of outside decisions, again, things that we didn't have a say in, that just kind of happened to us, how do we take those tough moments and how do we use them in 2021? What does it mean? How can God take those hard times and shift it into glory for God, but also beauty on earth? Because that can be hard. So for one example, like I said, I mentioned it last week, best friend Rachel's dad passed away very suddenly March of last year. So the hard thing with 2020 was experiencing a global pandemic without her dad, being away from her mom and her brother, because she lives in New York. And then on top of that, experiencing holidays in a very different way. She was able to come home for Thanksgiving and be with her mom and her brother. But when it came time for Christmas, it wasn't safe. She's like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to risk my mom and my brother, but I'm also not going to bring something back to New York if that's the case. So she experienced New York, but she experienced Christmas with her boyfriend Blake's family, who are amazing. And we love the Hillises. They're fantastic. But that was another loss and gain, where she gained the opportunity to spend time with a family that she loves. It's like her second family, but she lost the opportunity to spend the first Christmas without her dad with her mom and brother. So as a friend, now we're going back to the idea of sympathy and empathy, as a friend who not only lives out of state regardless of where she is, but as a friend who has never experienced loss of a parent, and especially not her dad, I can't empathize with her. I can't say that I know what she experiences because I don't. I'm very, very fortunate to not only have an amazing dad, but have my dad still here with me, supporting me through a pandemic. Many of these times where I've had really, really hard days, weeks with this pandemic, with my mental health, I go to my dad. I love my mom, but I go to my dad because he gets it. My dad can empathize with me when it comes to mental health, whereas my mom can sympathize. So it's the same thing with Rachel. I can sympathize with Rach because I loved her dad. Mr. Lundblom was one of the coolest men I've ever met and so kind and really was Rachel's best friend. So I can't empathize with her, but I can sit there and grieve with her. I can sit there and support her when she's having those hard moments. And that's why I think entering 2021, we need to be cognizant of all the loss that people experience, the bummer loss of 2020, because sometimes it's really big. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it's things that make us uncomfortable because we haven't experienced that before. Like I said, death of a loved one, unexpected death of a loved one. Because that includes our church family who has lost family members to COVID. Then there is the understanding of racism. It became so clear to so many of us this summer of how much work we as human beings and we as the church have to do to support our brothers and sisters of color. So when we talk about things like this of loss, what does that mean when we go into 2021? Does it mean we hide under our covers and we cry? Well, there's a time and a place for that. Because in Ephesians, the author isn't telling us, no, we do not cry. There is no crying, none of that, we don't do that. That's not what the author is saying. The author is telling us a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Remember, this was written thousands of years ago, before Jesus was even on the scene. And that's what it honestly mind boggles me when it comes to the Old Testament, is that we sit here and these authors, they're talking about the same God. The same God that made you and me, the same God that created Jesus and sacrificed Jesus for our sins, the God of Moses, the God of Abraham, the God of Rachel and Leah and Jacob. That same God that did all of that reminded this author that there will be, not that everyone's, you never know, there will be times you need to cry. Sometimes when you lose someone or a moment or whatever the case may be, you need to cry. And that's okay. Because with every time that you feel like you need to cry, you need to let that emotion out. It's actually like really bad for your body to keep it in, so please let it out. But then also remember that it's okay to feel that way, because at some point, at some time, you will laugh again. And there's not a time constraint on that. I'm not saying that the next day you're going to be laughing your head off. I'm saying with time, there will be laughter again. There will be a time to mourn and a time to dance. So on New Year's Eve, as most of you know, I'm assuming all of you, but most of you know, New Year's Eve, there is a Rocking New Year's Eve countdown in New York City. They do it in Times Square every year. It started in like the 70s. And so it's this huge deal, right? New York is like the hub to be in for the countdown, especially in the US. They have the ball drop, it's like, pew, Happy New Year. So Rachel's gone there the last 2 years that she has been living in New York. This year was the first year she did not, because it was not happening. I mean, they did, whatever, you get it. So where Rachel was, Blake's parents have a penthouse on the Hudson, which is the river that goes through New York. It's like super nice. Yeah, I can't imagine. And so she sent me a picture. They had dinner with them earlier. And so she sent me a picture of like all across New York, like everyone had their fancy lights on, like different colors and stuff. And then her apartment is like a couple of blocks down, and she lives near Central Park. And so it's like you could see over the trees, because the trees are pretty like flat. It's really crazy. You could see the fireworks that they were setting off in Times Square. And she was talking about how different it is, but that she was spending it with her roommates and with Blake at her apartment. She's like, it was just nice. It was nice to be with people I care about. It was nice to be with Blake and just have some type of normalcy going into 2021, when 2020 was anything but normal. And so she had that moment of, maybe she wasn't physically dancing, but she was able to dance into the new year. So then we have this moment of a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. Sometimes we have to give things away that maybe we're not ready to. Maybe we're not ready to give away our time. Maybe we're not ready to give away more energy than necessary, than we deem necessary. And sometimes God asks that of us. But then there is time to take that back. There's time for you to recharge if you're an introvert. There's times when you need to just be away from people. You've given people your time and your attention, and now it's time for you to recharge and be with yourself. And that's what they're saying with it when it comes to this throwing of the stones and gathering stones. But then this is the part I want to end on. A time to embrace and a time from refraining from embrace. That's us. We can't hug right now. When something big happens, I mean, we're not even just talking about like best friend Rachel lives in New York. She literally lives on like the catty corner opposite side of the country. Like that kind of we can't embrace. But there are moments where you can't even touch people that live right next to you. You can't hug them. You can't shake their hands. You can't give them a high five. You have to give them the elbow things. Like, tell me who I am. Tell me who I am. Ready? That's Pastor Jeff. Literally every time you see Pastor Jeff, he does like this little trollop thing, and then just, it's like so, it's a very dad thing. But anyway, we have to do these elbow things. Like we've talked about this, I will talk about it ad nauseum. I'm not a hugger. When all this ends, I'm still not gonna ask you for a hug. I'm sorry. I'm just like, my mom even tells me that ever since like I was a baby, like when I was a toddler, I've always been this like, don't touch me. Like I do the foot stomping still, like it's a whole thing. I'm very much myself, no hugs. But at the end of the day, I still want to give you high fives. I still want to like bump you and be able to make these random moments where I can show you through action that I care about you, that you mean a lot to me. So when there is a time to embrace again, I will give each of you a very significant high five, and it'll be fun. But until then, there's a time where we can't embrace. But 2020 will be different. And I'm not saying that to be optimistic, because I'm very much an optimist and I would totally say that. But there's evidence, and with modern medicine, we're going to be able to embrace again this year. It's going to take some time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Probably not even going to happen in February. But I promise you that at some point this year, I will give you a very traditional high five. You guys are awesome. And as we go into 2021, if you are having those hard moments where you need someone to listen to you and home is not doing it for you, or your friends just don't get it, Josh and I and your leaders are here for you. Even if I'm not your life group leader, even if Josh isn't your life group leader, that's literally our jobs, is to spend time with you. Josh plays video games with you guys all the time. Why don't you guys talk to me? Just because I can't play video games because I'm not good at it? It's rude. But you are seen, you are loved, and you are needed. And I say that going into 2021 because I need you to say that as your mantra every day. That God sees you, God needs you, and God loves you. Toodles.